Of course. Here's Section 1 crafted according to your instructions, within 1,500 words, keeping it tightly focused, vivid, and plot-driven, with natural, satisfying close that pushes the story forward. The heat shimmered above the cracked desert floor, blurring the line between land and sky. Callan Voss tightened his grip on the steering stick of the sand cruiser as he approached the skeletal remains of Port G77, the so-called abandoned starport he'd just purchased for a handful of credits and a signature scribbled on a cracked datapad. He pulled the cruiser to a halt beside a crumbling launch pad. Dust plumed around him as he swung a tired leg over the side and dropped into the grit. His boots crunched on the baked ground. The horizon stretched forever, interrupted only by the rusted rings of the starport. Enormous circular structures, half buried by drifting sand. Their original purpose now a mystery. Somewhere out here, he thought, was a place he could die without anyone noticing. That was the idea, at least. The sales contract had promised exclusive ownership, though Callan suspected the man who sold it to him had no more right to property than a rat to a throne. Still, the land was cheap, and he was tired of fighting for a future that no longer wanted him. He wandered the remains of the docking stations, his callous hand brushing against sun-warped steel. Ghosts of movement haunted his peripheral vision. Old banners fluttering, broken servitor droids twitching in the breeze. The starport still held echoes of purpose, though the world had long since moved on. Inside what had once been the main control tower, Callan dropped his pack and sank into the cracked leather of a long-abandoned command chair. Dust rose around him, thick enough to taste. For a while, he just sat there, watching the light crawl across the floor, feeling the silence creep into his bones. He hadn't planned to leave the farming world of Vela Prime. His ancestors had tilled those stubborn fields for generations, and he would have done the same until the corporations came. They poisoned the rivers with mining runoff, bought the land cheap from desperate families, and left nothing but salt and sorrow behind. The sun had turned cruel, the rains had fled, and Callan Voss had lost his wife to sickness in a year when there wasn't enough medicine or mercy to go around. After that, there was nothing left to fight for. 2 days passed. Callan spent them wandering the starport, repairing what he could, ignoring what he couldn't. At night, he slept under the skeletal shadow of the launch rings, staring up at a bruised purple sky, so wide it could swallow a manhole. Some nights he welcomed the idea. It was during the third sunset, as the desert wind howled across the flats, that Callan noticed something strange. A soft vibration thrummed to the ground, subtle but insistent. He rose from his bedroll and followed it to the edge of the main landing field. There, he saw a growing speck of darkness against the shimmering sky. A ship, sleek and fast, nothing like the rusted hulks he'd seen scavengers use. Its hull caught the dying light, throwing back sharp, dangerous glints. Callan's instincts, dull but not dead, screamed at him to run. Instead, he stood his ground. The ship landed with a low whine. Dust billowed outward, forcing Callan to shield his face. He squinted to the haze as the ramp descended with hydraulic hisses, and a figure emerged. The woman was tall, poised, wrapped in a crimson suit that gleamed like molten metal. She moved with the certainty of someone used to command. Her hair, silver blonde and cut sharply at the jaw, caught the last light of day. In her right hand, she carried a small device that looked suspiciously like a weapon. She approached, each step deliberate, boots crunching on the sand. Callan crossed his arms, making sure his knife, the only weapon he had left, was easy to reach. Not that it would matter against her. "You don't belong here," she said, her voice low and precise. "I could say the same to you," Callan replied, keeping his tone even. She stopped a few meters away, studying with a gaze that seemed to weigh and measure every inch of him. "Name?" "Callan Voss. I bought this place." He jerked his thumb toward the derelict structures. "Got a receipt and everything." She raised an eyebrow. "Bought it? From whom?" "Some trader passing through Meridian station markets." Paperwork looked official enough. The woman exhaled slowly, the barest flicker of frustration crossing her features. "This facility is not abandoned. It was never meant to be sold." "Looks pretty abandoned to me," Callan said, gesturing to the sand-choked pads and fallen towers. If you're here, reclaim it. You're about 2 decades late. Her gaze sharpened. You have no idea what this place really is. Don't much care, honestly, he said. Just needed a place where no one bothered me. Silence stretched between them. Overhead, the stars began to bloom in the deepening twilight, cold and watchful. Finally, she lowered the device, not a weapon after all, but some kind of scanner, and slid it into a holster at her hip. My name is Naira Soul, she said, and you're trespassing on restricted ground. Callan shrugged. Guess you'll be calling the authorities then. No. Her gaze shifted to the horizon, where the first glimmers of movement stirred. Small, dark shapes flitting between the dunes, too distant to identify, but close enough to worry about. We don't have time for that. Callan followed her gaze, a slow knot forming in his gut. Friends of yours. Enemies, Naira said. Yours now, too. He scowled. I didn't sign up for a fight. You signed up the moment you set foot here. She started walking toward the control tower, without waiting to see if he'd follow. Get your things. We have work to do. For a long moment, Callan stood rooted in place, the desert wind tugging at his clothes. He could turn around, leave it all behind, vanish into the wastelands like so many lost souls before him. No one would stop him. No one would care. But something in Naira's voice, not fear, but grim certainty, anchored him. With a muttered curse, Callan slung his pack over one shoulder and followed her into the gathering dark. Would you also like me to immediately continue with Section 2 in the same style? I can keep the momentum going. Of course. Here's Section 2 written according to your instructions. Tightly focused, 1,500 words. Strong narrative flow, character-driven, advancing both the story and conflict. The control tower smelled of scorched circuits and old fear. Callan followed Naira up the spiral stairs, each step groaning under their combined weight. Through the broken windows, he caught glimpses of the darkening desert, the strange movements growing closer, more deliberate, shapes resolved into forms. Humanoid, but wrong somehow, bent at odd angles, moving too fast across the sand. They're not human, he said, voice low. Not anymore. Naira answered without turning. Scavengers modified by their own greed. Biohacked mercenaries. They'll strip this place down to its bones if we let them. He reached the top level just behind her. The control room looked worse up close. Consoles gutted, monitors cracked, chairs overturned in haste or violence. Yet in the center of the chaos, a single panel pulsed with steady light. Naira crossed to it, her fingers moving swiftly over controls. Ancient systems stirred beneath the dust, groaning back to life. A holographic interface bloomed in midair, casting pale blue reflections over her sharp features. How bad is it? Callan asked, unable to hide the dry rasp in his throat. Bad enough, she muttered. Poor defenses are mostly offline. Manual overrides are shot. We have short-range perimeter turrets, but they're decades out of calibration. Translation? If they get close, we're dead. Callan grunted, comforting. Naira flicked through system schematics with ruthless efficiency. Her presence was a paradox. Calm, almost attached, yet every movement radiated urgency. He realized she wasn't just fighting for survival. She was protecting something. He stepped closer to the console, eyeing the schematics. Launch bays, storage vaults, underground passages branching like veins into the rock below. The scale of the facility was staggering. No wonder she cared. You gonna tell me why this dump is worth dying for? He asked. Naira's hand stilled on the console. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she spoke, voice tight. This starport isn't just a relic. It's a gateway. A gateway to what? To everywhere, she said, eyes locking with his. It houses a stellar gate, one of the last operational ones. Callan blinked. He'd heard legends, half-drunken tales from old spacers about gates that could fold space, leapfrogging across the galaxy in an instant, but he'd never seen one. Most people believed they were myths or long since lost to wars and time. Why hide it out here in the middle of nowhere? He asked. Because nowhere is the only place left to hide. Outside, the scavengers were gathering, a loose circle tightening with mechanical precision. A shiver ran down Callan's spine. Naira powered down the hologram and turned to him, her face hardening into resolve. Listen carefully. I was assigned to guard this site until a proper retrieval team could be assembled. We're years behind schedule. Supply lines collapsed. Communications blacked out. I don't know who's still out there. For all I know, we're the last. And now, Callan said grimly, it's just you and a washed-up farmer standing between this place and a horde of monsters. Her lips twitched, almost a smile, almost pity. That's about the shape of it. Callan felt the old weight settle onto his shoulders, heavy and familiar, the weight of responsibility, of choosing to stand instead of run. He rolled his shoulders and cracked his knuckles. All right, what's the plan? Naira led him down the tower, moving fast. First, we reactivate the perimeter turrets. Buy ourselves a little breathing room. And after that, we find the fail-safe buried beneath the main platform. If the scavengers breach the inner vaults, we destroy the gate. The way she said it, so calm, so final, made his chest tighten. Destroy something that could change the galaxy, because it was better than letting it fall into the wrong hands. They reached the main deck. Naira grabbed a battered utility case from a storage locker and tossed him a small device, a handheld activator linked to the turrets. Stay close. Don't try to be a hero. Wasn't planning on it, he said, tucking the device into his belt. The night swallowed them as they emerged into the open. The desert had transformed into a landscape of shadows and threat. Above, the twin moons cast a pale, ghostly light, illuminating the scavengers now closing in. They moved like a pack, hunched figures with glinting cybernetic limbs, faces obscured by breathing rigs and twisted armor. Their eyes burned red in the dark. Callan's mouth went dry. There's more than a handful. They always travel in numbers. Makes them bolder. Naira was already sprinting toward the perimeter towers, her movements fluid and sure. Callan followed, heart hammering. At the base of the nearest turret, Naira popped an access panel and yanked out a tangled mess of wires. Cover me, she barked. He turned, drawing his old revolver from its battered holster. The weapon was a relic, like everything else he owned, but it still held 6 rounds of something lethal. The scavengers had spotted them. A low, warbling howl split the air, and the pack surged forward. Callan squeezed off 2 shots. One scavenger dropped, twitching. Another barely flinched as a round ricocheted off its armored carapace. These weren't men anymore. They were machines wearing human skin. Naira cursed under her breath and jammed 2 wires together. Sparks erupted, and the turret whirred into life, its barrel twitching uncertainly before locking onto the nearest threat. Twin streams of plasma, fire lit up the night. The scavengers shrieked, scattering, but few pressed forward, heedless of the burning death raining down. Next tower, Naira shouted. They sprinted again, weaving between broken structures. Sand kicked up by their boots stung Callan's eyes, but he didn't slow down. The desert roared around them, a living thing made of fear and grit. At the second turret, the activation went faster. Callan covered Naira, picking off stragglers with grim efficiency. His hands moved automatically, the way they had when wild beasts threatened his farm, when everything depended on steady aim and faster reflexes. The second turret came online with a shriek of gears, joining the first in laying down a withering field of fire. It wasn't enough. More scavengers poured from the dunes, some riding twisted hoverbikes, others bounding forward on cybernetic limbs. They seemed endless, a tide of hunger and desperation. We can't hold them here, Callan said between gasps. Naira didn't argue. Fall back to the central platform. They retreated toward the massive launch pad, where the skeletal ring loomed against the star-streaked sky. The scavengers surged after them, emboldened by numbers, shrieking war cries that rattled the bones. At the center of the platform, Naira dropped to her knees and began prying up a concealed hatch. Callan emptied his revolver into the advancing mob, reloaded with trembling fingers, and kept firing. Every second bought her time. Finally, the hatch popped open with a hiss of stale air. Naira disappeared into the darkness below. "Go!" she shouted from inside. Callan hesitated for a heartbeat. Then he spun and dove after her, slamming the hatch closed just as the scavenger lunged. They slid down a steep maintenance shaft, friction burning through Callan's worn pants. They landed hard on a metal grate far. Of course. Here's Section 3. Following your style and instructions. Clear, focused narrative, about 1,500 words. No unnecessary elements. Strong momentum, no headings. The corridor shuddered under the assault above. Dust sifted from the cracked ceiling, and somewhere distant, metal shrieked in protest. Callan and Naira sprinted toward the reinforced door, their footsteps hammering out a frantic rhythm. The fail-safe chamber loomed ahead, a massive vault built into the bedrock itself, designed to outlast centuries of neglect or war. Its entrance bore the insignia of the vanished authority, a broken crown above a stylized gate. Callan had only ever seen that symbol in tattered history books. Naira reached the security console and yanked a cable from her suit, jacking it into the port. Lights blinked uncertainly as ancient systems tried to authenticate her presence. She cursed under her breath, fingers dancing across the controls. Behind them, the maintenance shaft echoed with inhuman shrieks. The scavengers had found the hatch. "How long?" Callan asked, voice taut. "Too long," she replied grimly. "The systems don't recognize my clearance anymore. Manual bypass it is." She pulled a slim, wicked-looking tool from her belt and began working the panel with swift, practiced movements. Sparks flew. Circuits whined. The door groaned reluctantly. Callan kept his revolver trained on the corridor, though he knew it wouldn't matter. Ammunition was running low, and even if it weren't, numbers would drown them eventually. Still, he would stand. He had spent years trying to run from life, from responsibility, hiding on that forgotten farm, pretending the world couldn't touch him. Now, at the bitter end, he understood you didn't run from the things that mattered. You stood and fought, even when the odds laughed in your face. Especially then. The door finally hissed open. Cold air poured from the chamber beyond, carrying the sterile tang of preserved technology. Naira rushed inside, beckoning him after her. He followed, and the door slammed shut behind them with a heavy finality. The fail-safe chamber was vast and circular, the walls lined with dormant machinery. In its center stood a crystalline structure, hovering inches above a platform inscribed with old sigils. Energy thrummed faintly through it, casting ghostly reflections across the room. "The core of the gate," Naira said, reverence softening her voice. "This is the key to collapse or control." She moved to a control pedestal and began inputting commands. Holographic interfaces flared to life, displaying schematics, power flows, countdown timers. "Destroying it won't be easy," she said. "It's designed to resist sabotage. We'll need to initiate an overload sequence." "What's that mean for us?" She hesitated. "If we start it, we'll have minutes to evacuate, maybe. If we don't, the scavengers will get through, and the gate will be theirs. And if they get the gate..." Callan didn't need her to finish the sentence. He could imagine it well enough. War, conquest, ruin spreading across worlds that didn't even know the danger yet. "Then let's not let them," he said. Naira gave him a look, almost grateful and keyed in the sequence. Warning alarms howled through the chamber. The crystalline core began to pulse faster, energy building visibly within its lattice. The floor trembled. Distant explosions rattled the structure. The scavengers were using heavier equipment now, blasting their way down. "We need to move," Naira said, her voice tight. They sprinted toward a secondary exit, a narrow maintenance tunnel that wound deeper into the underground complex. As they ran, the lights flickered erratically, casting long, jerking shadows. The tunnel split into two paths ahead, a rough T-junction. Without hesitation, Naira veered left. Callan hesitated. A half-second only, as something flickered in the right-hand path. A figure, standing utterly still in the gloom. Not a scavenger. It stepped forward, and Callan felt the air grow colder, heavier. The figure wore a sleek uniform, unmarred by the dust and ruin around it. Its eyes glowed faintly blue. A sentry unit. Old tech, authority tech. Some last safeguard the port, awakened by the fail-safe protocol. It spoke, its voice a mechanical rasp layered with something almost human. Unauthorized presence detected. Lethal force authorized. "Naira," Callan shouted. She skidded to a halt and turned. Her face paled as she saw the sentry raising its weapon, a sleek pulse rifle crackling to life. "Cover me!" she barked, pulling a small cylindrical device from her belt. Callan didn't question. He fired, rounds sparking harmlessly off the sentry's armor. It advanced with the implacable inevitability of a machine born for one purpose. Naira hurled the device, a stun grenade, and ducked behind a support beam. The grenade detonated with a muted thump, releasing a burst of electromagnetic energy. The sentry staggered, its systems glitching violently. Sparks danced across its limbs. "Move!" Naira shouted. They ran, pounding deeper into the maintenance tunnels. Behind them, the sentry recovered with terrifying speed, giving chase. "We can't outrun it." Callan gasped. "I know." Naira veered toward a heavy blast door set into the wall. It looked ancient, its locking mechanisms corroded and stubborn. "I'll hold it off," Callan said, stepping forward. "No," she snapped. "We finish this together." Together? He nodded, feeling something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Hope, not in survival. That was still a slim thread, but in the knowledge that he wasn't alone in this fight. Naira slammed a bypass key into the door control. It creaked open just wide enough for them to squeeze through. Callan went first, turned to cover her as she followed. The sentry rounded the corner, pulse rifle humming. Callan fired his last 2 rounds. One struck the sentry's optics, cracking the glowing lens. The machine flinched, momentum stalling just long enough for Naira to slam the door shut. Heavy bolts locked into place. The sentry threw itself against the door once, twice, but it held. Breathing hard, Callan leaned against the wall. Naira slumped beside him. "Remind me," he panted, "why didn't you mention killer robots before?" "I thought it was dormant," she said. "Most of the old sentries powered down years ago. Next time, maybe don't assume." Despite the situation, she laughed, a raw, real sound. It surprised him how much he liked hearing it. The tunnel beyond sloped upward toward the surface. Somewhere above, the fail-safe countdown continued, the core swelling with unstable energy. If they didn't reach open ground before it detonated, none of this would matter. They forced themselves onward, legs trembling, lungs burning. As they climbed, Callan realized something. The deeper they went, the more intact the facility seemed. Walls here were cleaner, systems humming with residual power. It was as if this part of the port had been deliberately preserved, hidden even from the scavengers. Finally, they emerged into a wide hangar carved into the mountainside. Massive doors stood ajar, letting in thin desert moonlight. Dust motes danced in the beams. And there, in the center of the hangar, sat a small, sleek starship. Callan gaped. The vessel looked almost new, a sharp contrast to the decay around it. It hummed faintly, awaiting activation. Naira rushed to it, running her hands over the hull with something like reverence. "A courier ship," she said breathlessly. "Preloaded. Probably left for emergencies like this." "Of course. Here's Section 4. Carefully following your instructions. Focus narrative, around 1,500 words, every sentence meaningful, strong ending that leaves room for continuation." The stars stretched out before them, cold and unblinking. Naira guided the ship through the thinning atmosphere with a precision that belied her exhaustion, her hand steady even as the vessel's frame vibrated under the strain of escape velocity. The world they left behind, the broken starport, the dying desert, was a shrinking wound on the planet's surface, distant now but still burning in their memories. Callan watched in silence, absorbing the reality of their survival. His heart still hammered against his ribs, each be a reminder that he was, against every odd, still alive. But the relief was short-lived. They had escaped the immediate danger, yes, but the larger conflict, the one Naira had only hinted at, loomed ahead, vast and complicated. "Where to now?" he asked, voice rough. Naira didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on the navigational display, scanning for threats, plotting their next move. "There's a dead zone a few clicks from here. No patrols, no satellites. We'll jump from there." "Jump where?" he pressed. She hesitated, fingers tightening around the controls. To a place they can't find us. Not yet. Callan sat back, sensing that more questions would only be met with more evasion. He understood something fundamental had shifted between them. No longer simply reluctant allies thrown together by circumstance. They were now bound by the shared weight of survival and the knowledge of what they carried. Minutes passed in tense silence. The courier ship, swift and nimble, darted between the drifting debris field of abandoned orbital stations. Ancient relics from a time when this system had thrived. Broken spires and twisted hulls floated in the void, silent witnesses to humanity's decline. As they navigated the graveyard of technology, Naira finally spoke. "The Authority isn't dead," she said, voice low. "It went underground. Smaller cells, sleeper agents, hidden resources. They've been waiting for the right moment to return." "And the gate?" Callan asked. "It's a key," she said simply. "Not just to this world, to dozens of them. Link gates scattered across the stars. Whoever controls the network controls travel, trade, war. And you knew this," he said, more a statement than a question. "I was trained for it," she admitted. "Born for it, really. My family served the Authority for generations. I broke from them when I realized what they planned to do with it." Callan absorbed that, feeling the edges of his old, cynical instinct sharpening. "You used me," he said. Naira didn't flinch. "I needed help. You had the Starport. You had heart enough to care what happened to more than just yourself. That's rare." He stared at her, searching for deceit and finding only weary honesty. Maybe that was the most dangerous thing of all. Not that she had manipulated him, but that he understood why, and didn't entirely blame her. Ahead, the dead zone loomed, a patch of black space where sensor pings fell silent, and the stars seemed oddly distorted. Naira adjusted their heading, preparing the jump drive. "Once we jump," she said, "there's no turning back. They'll know we survived. They'll hunt us. And if we don't jump," Callan asked, "then we drift until they find us. And this time, we won't get another chance." He exhaled slowly, feeling the finality settle into his bones. Running had been his life for so long, running from grief, from responsibility, from hope itself. Now, for the first time, he understood that survival wasn't just about escape. It was about choosing to fight for something worth dying for. The ship's systems beeped a warning. Incoming vessels, 3 of them, had entered scanner range. Scavengers? Callan asked. Naira's jaw tightened. No, worse. On the display, sleek black ships appeared, moving with chilling coordination. Authority hunters. No scavenger ship could move like that. Precise, surgical, lethal. "They must have been watching the port," Naira said, voice grim, waiting for someone to trip the failsafe. The ships accelerated, their intent unmistakable. "Strap in," Naira ordered. "This is going to be rough." She punched the drive sequence. The courier ship shuddered violently as energy built in the core, the air crackling with static. The hunters fired, bolts of searing light streaking toward them. Callan felt the impacts reverberate through the hull. Warning lights flashed. Hull integrity dropping. Almost there. Naira shouted over the alarms. One of the hunter ships peeled off, arcing around to flank them. The targeting system shrieked a proximity warning. Callan reacted without thinking. He lunged across the console, hitting the manual defense overrides. The ship's belly gun spat a line of plasma fire, striking the hunter's wing. The enemy ship wobbled, spiraled, and exploded. The shockwave buffeted them, but Naira kept the ship steady, eyes locked on the jump timer. 5 seconds. The remaining hunters closed in, firing relentlessly. The shields flickered and died. The hull groaned. 3 seconds. Callan gripped the edge of the seat, every muscle tense for impact. 2 seconds. A missile lock warning screamed through the cockpit. 1. The stars stretched, twisted, and snapped as the jump drive engaged. Space folded around them, and the ship vanished into the void. When the world resolved again, they were adrift in a pocket of deep space, a place with no name, no claim, no memory. Silence enveloped them, broken only by the softening of the ship's systems struggling to stabilize. Naira sagged back in her seat, covering her face with her hands for a moment before dropping them to her lap. Her knuckles were white from gripping controls so tightly. Callan exhaled shakily. His body felt like a collection of bruises and fatigue, stitched together by adrenaline and stubbornness. "We made it," he said, more to himself than to her. "For now," Naira replied, but this was just the first step. She rose from her seat, moving toward the small, cramped storage bay behind the cockpit. Callan followed, curiosity gnawing at him. She opened a hidden compartment beneath the floor. Inside was a case, sleek, black, sealed with biometric locks. Naira knelt and placed her hand on the panel. It scanned her palm, beeped once, and clicked open. Inside the case was a single object, a small metallic orb humming with faint internal light. Symbols, old, forgotten language, crawled across its surface like living tattoos. Callan stared, instinctively recognizing it for what it was, power beyond imagining. "This is one of the core nodes," Naira said quietly. "One of many. Together, they can control the entire gate network. And whoever hold them," Callan murmured, "rules the stars," she finished. She closed the case carefully, locking it once more. "They'll come for us," Callan said. Naira nodded. "They already are." "And us?" he asked. "We find the others first," she said simply. "We break the network before it can enslave another generation." Callan looked out the viewport at the endless expanse of unknown stars. The path ahead was dangerous, uncertain, filled with enemies and impossible odds. But for the first time in a long, long while, he felt something stronger than fear. Purpose. He turned back to Naira, who met his gaze with fierce determination. "Then let's get to work," he said. And together, in the heart of nowhere,